Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. This is the public hearing and public meeting of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 240179, 240180, 240181, 240182, and resolution number 240193. Ms. Lawhead, will you please call the roll to take attendance?
Councilmember Squilla. Councilmember Gautier. Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Young. Councilmember Driscoll. Councilmember Lozada. Councilmember Bass. Councilmember Phillips. Councilmember O'Neill. Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Harity. Councilmember Ahmad. Councilmember Landau. Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember O'Rourke. Council President Johnson.
Present. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. Ms. Lawhead, will you please read the title of the bills and resolutions?
Bill number 240179, an ordinance to adopt the operating budget for fiscal year 2025. Bill number 240180, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1800 of the Philadelphia Code entitled School Tax Authorization to provide for an increase in the tax of the Board of Education of the School District of Philadelphia is authorized to impose on real estate, and amending Chapter 19-1300 entitled Real Estate Taxes to establish an equivalent reduction in the tax rate for the city real estate tax and making technical changes, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 240181, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal year 2025 capital budget. Bill number 240182, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2025 through 2030 inclusive. Resolution number 240193, providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2025 through 2029 and incorporating revisions with respect to fiscal year 2024, which is to be submitted by the Mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority pursuant to an intergovernmental cooperation agreement by and between the City and the Authority.
Thank you very much. Today we will continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal year 2025, a capital program and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal year 2025 through fiscal year 2030. This morning we will hear testimony from the Register of Wills, Managing Director's Office, Office of Homeless Services, and the Police Department. This afternoon we will continue with questions for these departments. Ms. Lawhead, will you please call the first witness to testify?
The first person to testify is John Sabatina, Register of Wills.
Good morning.
Good morning, President Johnson and distinguished members of City Council. I'm John Sabatina, Register of Wills and Clerk of Orphans Court. I'm honored to be here today to present my budget address for the Register of Wills office. As your Register of Wills, I am grateful for the opportunity to outline our physical needs and highlight the critical work we do on behalf of the people of Philadelphia. Our office provides essential services that touch the lives of every Philadelphian in one way or another. Joining me today are Bob Stewart, my Chief Deputy, Emilio Di Gregorio, Deputy of Government Affairs, Errol Ditka, Finance Director, Sharif Roseborough, Deputy of Human Resources, Kyle Sampson, Director of Public Engagement, Frank Campisi, our Solicitor, and Keith Harris from our administrative team. I am pleased to provide testimony on the Register of Wills fiscal year 2025 operating budget. Our department plans, with additional funding requests made to the administration, the Register of Wills Department plans for fiscal year 25 are to increase the wealth for all citizens of Philadelphia through education by introducing a legal support staff to implement a title clearance unit, which will replace the probate deferment initiative. This new unit will include a staff of attorneys, paralegals, and researchers to augment and enhance the function of legal nonprofit organizations. Second, we're going to continue our diverse hiring practices to better reflect the population we serve. Proudly, we exceed the city average in female employees and far exceed the city's diversity goals in our contracts. Third, we want to continue restoration and preservation of the historic archives. Fourth, increase our presence in community through public outreach via our new public engagement department, which will provide assistance to constituents in protecting their generational wealth through education about wills and estates. Fifth, onboard a legacy software system vendor to make the necessary changes recommended by the state auditor. Sixth, in addition, as requested by the city solicitor, we would like to take on record keeping of the life partnerships from the Department of Human Relations. I'd like to mention that no additional funding was granted by the administration above the current appropriation level. From this point on, I'd like to turn, excuse me. Yeah, any questions on the little bit that I just went over?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Sabatina, and just have a couple questions before I turn it over to my colleagues. Just give us an update on, I know members of this body invested heavily on supporting, under the leadership of Councilwoman Catherine Gilmore Richardson, the investment on Tangled Titles. We invested a significant amount of part of our budget last year to support those efforts. And so let's talk more about your work in terms of going out in the community, making sure we're addressing the issue of equity when it comes to generational wealth, which you just talked about, specifically regarding Tangled Titles. And then also, I know that you have an initiative where you want to hire lawyers to come in-house to work with estate planning for individuals. How would that be different than the partnership we have right now with Community Legal Services that's doing Tangled Title?
Yeah, we have a plan to continue to work with Community Legal Services, but we want to, with our request, add additional staff to actually work on title clearance. We have developed a title clearance unit which will actually work on clearing the titles, which is quite different from the previous administration, which basically deferred probate costs, which were amounted to $300 or $400, and then passed everything off to Community Legal Services. And Community Legal Services, unfortunately, worked on the restriction of the poverty level to take in constituents. We intend to work above that level to offer services to the entire citizens of the city of Philadelphia. And I have here with me various staff members who are going to work on each and every department. First off, I want to call on Emilio DiGregorio on operations and contracts.
How you doing, Council President and
Good morning.
Council members? So the title clearance unit specifically will be operating at 180% above the poverty line. And this will cover low and middle income class families. The other change is that we're working with constituents who don't have pressing needs, and that is one of the main things that CLS and VIP work with.
Can you clarify that again?
So if CLS and VIP take priority cases based on foreclosure, major utility shutoff, emergency repair on the house, they're taking priority for those constituents, whereas someone who's just trying to get their affairs in order kind of is a delayed or a wait list process with that. And we're just looking to...
So you're going to work with the ones who aren't key priority at the moment? Just individuals who
We'll
are trying to get
take
their titles
anyone
clear?
who overflow capacity for anything, regardless of situation.
Okay. And just to follow up on the community engagement component, give us an idea with your community engagement unit, the work that y'all are going to be doing in terms of outreach and, again, making sure this process equitably fair across the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah. So with our community engagement strategy, we're looking to empower individuals with effective estate planning. Some of the things we see that there's a cultural disconnect in some communities as far as, having that conversation with family members. So bringing these strategies to remove assets out of probate, transition with named beneficiaries or rights of survivorship deeds, having a more relaxed conversation on how to protect your assets and transfer assets without making declarations is the top priority. Creating a will is a huge step for some people. So those are some of the stopgaps that we want to introduce to people to take advantage of. In addition to that, we're explaining trusts, how that can become a facet for them to utilize in their estate planning, and just an overall education on.
How many people in your community engagement unit?
Right now, we have about, I think,
What's the actual number?
currently the actual number is 3,
3.
but I know that they are onboarding another 3 individuals to
So
round
you
out
have a
the-
total of 6.
Eventually.
How much for this particular budget will go towards your community engagement unit?
I'll pass that to the finance director.
Good morning, Council President. My
Good
name is
morning.
Earl Dika, Finance Director. So our current budget is about $5,024,000 at this point. So we have requested additional positions during the budget call and presently. So additional staff members will be dedicated to the community outreach unit. Our current staff is doing the best with the resources that they have at the moment, given that the Register of Wills has many competing priorities important in the office and also outside through Citizens of Philadelphia. So given what the limited resources that we have, we're doing the best we can. But if additional funding is provided, we can dedicate more resources to the community unit.
I just want to acknowledge Roger Powell. He does community engagement, and I just want to acknowledge him for the work that he has been done. I know we partner on a couple events, but I definitely want to acknowledge him for his hard work and his dedication in terms of doing outreach. We think it's important that when we're dealing with the issue of gentrification here in the city of Philadelphia, and a lot of times we have a lot of tax incentives and tax relief programs here in the city of Philadelphia that we are allowed to help people with, or that's available to help people with. However, if they don't have that D in their name, for the most part, they can't take advantage of the several different tax relief measures that we have available for them. And that's why, from a community engagement standpoint and educating the wider public about how you get the title cleared, how do you go about either transitioning the deed from one family member to another family member to make sure it's in their names, and so people can have that opportunity to take advantage of the tax relief measures that we have. And my last question before I turn over to my members, you mentioned also in your testimony that y'all have exceeded the diversity and equity goals of most city departments. So give us an idea on your contracts, your diversity and inclusion numbers.
So currently our contracts, we are close to like 50%. We have minority contracts. Also we have disabled. As far as like diversity in the office, we are about 50%. We just extended 3 additional offers to 3 additional staff members that will onboard soon. So 50% minority currently plus the 3 there will come up. The majority of our contracts go through the city's process. Before we can issue a contract, we reach out to the city's Office of Economic Opportunity and we work with them to make sure that we meet the city's standards and goals.
So you said 50% plus, correct?
Plus 3 additional staff members we just extended onboarding offers.
Okay, that's all I have. Before I turn over to the members, I want to acknowledge the presence of Councilmember Kendra Brooks, Councilmember O'Rourke, Councilmember Mark Squilla. Did I miss anybody else? Okay. With that being said, the chair recognizes Councilmember Jamie Gaudier.
My questions are for OHS, sorry.
Chair recognizes Councilmember Curtis Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. You like
Councilmember Jones, just 1 second. If you aren't asking questions of this round for the Register of Wills, I'm going to ask you to turn off your light, and then when the next department come up, then go ahead and press your light, so we'll know who's asking questions during this round. Chair recognizes Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. You, like our mayor, are a little over 100 days in. So the questions I'm going to ask you aren't necessarily to be answered today, but might become priorities in your administration. In my office, when we see a pothole the first time, it's a pothole. We see it 10 times, it's a problem. What I'd like some guidance and clearance from your office on is the orphan court relationship. And what do I mean by that? Literally, I'm around the corner from it. Come out your doors, people often come out. And one of the issues that came up was about an elderly aunt who had siblings, relations in the house. And for whatever reasons, it was determined that her care wasn't adequate. So they assigned a entity to take over Auntie's health. She wound up in one of the senior citizen housing units. I'm not going to name the one, but they wound up there. And they used the equity of the home to pay for her admittance. When that equity ran out, she had to go. So I want to kind of understand what role you guys play and whether or not you and your office might take that on to take a look at how often that happens and what we collectively can do to prevent seniors from winding up in places that I would not want my mom to be in. Who deals with orphan court?
That is a federally mandated situation where they use their equity. As far as what can be done or what happens, that would go back to orphans court, and that would be in Judge Wood Skipper's bailiwick, and would not enter into our office.
And you're saying you don't have a role to play?
No, the orphans court basically is run by the judge, and she makes legal decisions.
So I'm saying the Register of Wills in that kind of case, when the deed is utilized, you don't play a role.
As far as my understanding of our relationship with orphans court is we are basically the administrative arm, and the decisions are made by the Judge Wood Skipper, who is the president judge of orphans court.
So what I'd like to do offline, not to hold it up in here, is work with you and orphans court. Judge Wood Skipper is a friend, to figure that out and see how often that happens, and if that's a pervasive problem or not. And so assign somebody to work with me.
I would love to give you an answer, but like I'm trying to explain, that's a legal question for orphans court, and it's run basically those decisions are the decisions of the president judge of orphans court.
Okay, let's put a pin in that
And
one.
if I can find, when I leave here, I will talk to Judge Wood Skipper and see how she may handle it. But however, she is the president judge of orphans court, and
Got it.
those matters are in her hands.
The second thing that I found out about was your role with historic documents. How are we situated to preserve them? Are we doing, what's the status? And the reason this came up was during the uprisings, the riots, your office was in danger because they broke your windows out or something like that. How are we preserving some of those documents post?
We are
George Floyd?
presently in contact with a contractor who would handle updating the archives. There's a lot of areas that need to be addressed. Here again, funding is a problem. There's literally millions of documents dating back to the start of the city that we have in our possession, but the preservation of them is well behind every other county. Some of that's due to the fact that the size of the city of Philadelphia and the astronomical costs, but we are speaking to a firm that's in charge of digitalizing and preserving those documents and hopefully updating the system.
So to the degree that you need resources, you should tell us, because we're partners in this. William Penn's charter is one of those documents. And those are the kinds of things that we appreciate, but we kind of value as citizens, and we want to preserve for future generations. So as you run into those kinds of challenges, it's our burden too. And so let us know. We can work it out with our state partners. You provide a lot of money to the state, and some of that I think needs to come back for preservation efforts. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
we have also contacted people in the state, legislators and what have you, and attempting to get grants to cover some of the costs of that program.
Makes sense. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. The chair recognizes Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President, and thank you to our register. I wanted to thank you for the meeting that we held previously, wherein you spoke to your focus and continued focus on the tangled title issue and resolving tangled titles. And in particular, I was very interested in the part where you talked about ensuring that Philadelphians would not have liens when they go through the program on their property around tangled title resolution. So if you could just speak to that so that we can understand programmatically what the difference will be from what the program was previously and then what the program will look like now. I think that would be helpful for my colleagues.
You want to go ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember Richardson. So the previous program was working with deferring fees, guiding individuals through the probate process. There was a lien instituted for those fees, and then from there, the person would take their letters of administration or testamentary and attempt to record a new deed. Certain times, those people ran into hurdles because their needs weren't dire at the time, so the deed process became a little longer. Life happens, the deed never gets recorded. It's still an open tangled title case, but at least they went through the probate process. If and when they were able to pay the probate fees, the lien was removed, and so on and so forth. Some individuals outside of the structure found that the lien was restrictive, caused concern for going to get funding for a new mortgage and whatnot. And then the selling factor of the program, we weren't receiving as many cases as we anticipated. So the title clearance unit, working at 108% above the poverty level, covers a wider gap of individuals. And we're covering a facet of the probate process that wasn't covered prior, which is conducting error searches to ensure that the wealth is transferred in accordance to the law, which is our main mission. We're also providing additional guidance with petition submissions and working with our recorder of deeds, James Leonard, with deed recording.
And to your point, relative to the cost of the lien, if the family and/or individual is unable to pay for I don't want to say lien, but if they're unable to pay for the fees, then what happens? Are you all covering that fee? Are you waiving the fee?
If the individual qualifies for a IFP, the register has the authority to waive the fee.
Got you. Okay, thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome, Madam Leader. The chair recognizes Councilmember Jim Harity.
Thank you, Council President. Hey, Register, how are you? With the additional funding for the title clearance unit, how many people will be eligible for that program?
You want to take it? Yeah.
Thank you, Councilman Harity, for that question. Working at 180% above the federal poverty line, we're going from 15% of the city's population to about 43%.
Okay. And can you provide updates on efforts to digitize and preserve the records and make them more easy to access to the public?
Certainly. So with our most recent project, we've been able to index over 400 of our large format books, and over 50,000 records are preserved for, perpetuity. With those records, we're ranging from 1699 up until 2002. And also, this has given us the ability to build the integrity of our database for when we eventually go customer side, public view, for everyone to utilize.
Okay. All right. And all right, thank you. That's all I got, Council President.
You're welcome. The chair recognizes Councilmember Mark Rulandau.
Thanks. I'll take it. Thank you, Council President. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to lay a little background first as to what the problem is, this widely known problem that Philadelphia has widespread tangle title issues. According to Pew, there are approximately 11,000 tangled titles in Philadelphia, and the problem has disproportionately affected Black homeowners. Just like there's a racial wealth gap and a racial home ownership gap, there's also a racial wills gap. Dr. Thomas Mitchell, the MacArthur Genius Award winner at Boston University, who has researched Black home ownership issues, has said that 65% of white families have a will, while only 23% of Black families have a will. And the disparity doesn't go away with educational attainment. In fact, a higher percentage of white people without a high school education have a will, 57%, than Black people with a college education at 32%. So this is a massive problem that we have there's a lot of opportunities here where we can really make some significant change. What are some of the barriers that you've identified that low-income heirs face in raising their loved ones' estates at your office to ensure that the deed to the family home is properly transferred to the heirs? And what can we do to help surmount those barriers?
Well, like we already explained, we're going to have a title clearance unit, which we're hoping to develop with council's aid, that will basically work to clear the titles. We're going to have a staff of an attorney, paralegals, and other staff working on it to try to, not try, but actually clear various titles of individuals and do some research and an heir search when necessary to clear the titles.
How will staff attorneys in your office be able to clear titles if they're practicing basically before your office?
What?
If they're practicing before your office, how would it be allowable for you to have lawyers representing people to clear titles when you're at least the administrative decision maker?
I'll take it.
Thank you for that question, Councilperson Landau. Our attorneys won't be attorney of records for these estates. They'll be ensuring that the the steps that are needed to follow are followed through on. And just to hit back on the Thomas Mitchell mention you made, we've identified some things that from their last conference that was a couple weeks ago, and there were a lot of stakeholders from Philadelphia there. And while legal resources is a huge hurdle for people, and creating that will, the number one thing that a lot of individuals from urban areas noted was that getting people to create deeds with right of survivorship and ensuring that people are aware of adding beneficiaries to assets, beneficiary first level and second level, was the best way to circumvent getting into a tangle title. And it's unfortunate that that's what was said, but it's the reality, and it's unfortunate.
I understand that, and I'm very excited that you're going to have a larger community engagement group. That this is the number one thing that we need to do proactively. But right now, we also have a lot of people coming to your office with tangled titles, and if your staff is going to engage in just kind of assisting in the right, I'm trying to figure out what your unit's going to do. And also, you said you're going to take people up to 180% of poverty, but CLS takes people up to 250% of poverty. Is there a way to expand your guidelines?
Well, according to their website, we didn't see that stat.
They have different funding streams that allow them to go beyond the basic restrictions.
Okay,
I would hope that your office could help anybody who's coming in.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and we're just not helping people with pressing issues. So if you don't have a foreclosure or shelf sale, we're still going to help you. So that's kind of where we differentiate in that.
I appreciate that, and I'm trying to wrap my head around exactly what the unit would do, and I see that there's a lot of administrative help that can happen, I think, internally, that isn't the full legal work of actually representing somebody, but there might be a fine line in that. We'd love to talk to you more about that process. And what will you, tell me more about your community outreach group and how diverse, you said you have 3 people, you want to increase it to 6. How diverse are they? Do they speak other languages? And how are they getting trained?
So we utilize all of our staff. We have Spanish-speaking individuals, Vietnamese, and we may have currently 6 people with the onboarding of our outreach staff, but we utilize individuals from our probate unit, our marriage license unit. So when we have an event, we have individuals from different units along with the outreach staff at these events. And from there we can provide a full array of all of our services at these events.
Okay.
We also hire language experts. We work with the city. We book interpreters on site to attend public events or the community outreach events. We target different languages. So.
I like that, thanks. More? I've got more. 21 seconds. Are you going to formalize your Informa Pauperis IFP process? For folks, for people who can't afford the fees for filing? Do you have a...
We mirror what the courts use currently.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Councilmember Landau. The chair now recognizes Councilmember Bass.
Good morning. How are you? First of all, let me say thank you for being here. And, I know that it's as someone mentioned earlier, it's like the mayor, you've been here for a little more than 100 days, but I think that you have with you some really great qualified talent that I'm very happy that you were able to retain once you took over the office. And I want to just acknowledge Sharif Roseborough, Hal, who's here, who does human resources, and also Roger Poe. I saw Roger over there. Okay, Roger, who we've, our office as well has worked extensively with them, and they're doing a great job. So that being said, I also wanted to just ask just a couple of questions really quickly. And I don't know if this is for, Human Resources or Sharif or whoever, but I wanted to get more information and just follow up a little bit on Councilwoman Landau's question on the community outreach piece that you do. Can you give us some indication as to what does the community outreach team do? Is it more reactive? Is it proactive? And for that specific team, what are the demographics of that team?
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Bass. So currently, the team, as you know, Roger, Kyle, can you guys hear me? Kyle Sampson, and we're onboarding several other people. So right now we have 3. We'll probably finish with 6, but more importantly, I want to increase the functionality of the community outreach.
What's the demographics of the 3 and then the additional 3?
But the future I can't speak to just yet. There are currently three African-American,
Okay.
2 male, 1 female. The most recently onboarded person who will definitely join that team is an African-American female. She'll be our graphics person. And then the 2 future to be determined.
Do any of them in specific speak Spanish or?
So we have 1 person we're considering for the team. We already made an offer to bring onto our team, but whether we're going to use community outreach, she speaks 2 different Indian languages. We have Spanish. Kyle speaks Arabic. So off the top of my head, that's all I remember at the moment. We have Portuguese, and we have a lot of different languages on the staff. You were asking specifically about community outreach or the whole team? The whole team, we got about 15 languages.
I know it's very diverse, the entire team.
Yes,
very
so
diverse.
that's part of the reason. So what the functionality of the team that I want to do in terms of saying someone going to a community event and being able to start the process for people, we're bringing in people who are a little bit more knowledgeable about each specific department. So in the past, in fact, just Saturday, we had people from different departments at our community outreach events. So they're not necessarily community outreach people. Today, right now, they're back in the department doing short certificates of state services, inheritance tax, but on Saturday, they were at our community event working at table answering questions. So that's part of what we want to do, where it's not so much this person is just community outreach. This person may work in marriage licenses and can answer questions about something. They may work in records and talk about you need an exemplified copy so that you can get a citizenship situation going on with the federal government. There's all kinds of things, but these people actually be able to answer the questions better because they're community outreach. They know who to reach out to, but they not know it so deeply as to answer a really hard question. So that's the one thing we want to do. But yeah, we want to do about 6 people. Like we said, we brought a really talented young woman to do graphics, and she'll start in a couple weeks. And that'll help with the educational material and all that. So we're really focused on that. Just, again, being just a little more than 100 days in, we're just restructuring and putting the right people in place to lead the department and take us in that direction.
Okay. And so for those folks that you are bringing in, can you talk, or actually can we have Sharif talk a little bit about the onboarding process for those who are going to be doing community outreach work? Because it's important to have a sense of exactly what is that going to look like?
And I missed the beginning part of your question. I'm sorry. What is it going to look like for
that community outreach part of your team? I was asking if Ms. Roseborough, as the human resources person, could speak to what like how are they going to be onboarded? Because it's very important that the way you come in is as important as the work that you'll be doing. So.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We do a strange.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Sharif Roseborough Howell, Deputy of Human Resources. On board, it look like we interview. It's a panel that we sit back, we interview. We ask
Pardon the
questions.
interruption. May you please speak into the mic for the stenographer? And just please restate your name for the record and your title.
Sharif Roseborough Howell, Deputy of Human Resources. Our hiring board is where We have several people on the panel, and we interview. We look at your background, your interests, your thoughts, what you think about your community, and if you have empathy, or you have passion for your position. Because in this position, you definitely need empathy, you need passion, and you have to have a work ethic in order to do these positions.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, because we wanted to make sure that those who are doing that community outreach position, you know, they have the outgoing personality, they're very interested in being an outreach person, and, you know, they've got the skill set that's necessary to make people feel comfortable, people from the community feel comfortable, like, this is an office that's going to help me. They're not going to hurt me. They're not going to take my property. They're not going to, you know, do something that's going to be damaging to me or my family. They speak the language. They're interested in me. And so that onboarding process, I just wanted to ask her if she could speak to that. So thank you so much for that. And I just wanted to say that, you know, like speaking into the microphone, we all know, many of us who know Sharif know that she can speak really loudly, so I'm surprised. But thank you very much. Do I have any more time, Madam Chair?
If you have one more question,
I have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
So my last question is, what's the average cost to untangle a title for the Register of Wills office and also for the individual homeowner?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Councilperson Bass. Based on the Pew study that was conducted, it was anywhere between, I think, $5,000 to $10,000, depending on the complexity of the estate.
Okay, thank you. I have to do something about that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman Bass. The chair now recognizes Councilmember Squilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Register. The same issue as tangled titles, and I know that we invested heavily last year in trying to unscramble the tangled titles. And do we know, under the process last year, how many tangled titles were completed?
Thank you for that question, Councilperson Squilla. We had 62 PDI estates. Of those, 21 new deeds were recorded. So out of the 62, 21 were recorded. The remaining cases are still pending resolution.
Are they still under CLS?
The individuals are awaiting assistance to have a new deed recorded or drawn up through any various organization, one of which could be CLS, could be Philly VIP, Senior Law Center. We've provided all the stakeholders as a resource to them to utilize.
And do we know, I know from the Pew study, there's I guess a projection of how many tangled titles. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell, but they had a number. If there was additional resources added, do you think 30 a year is something that is good? Do you think we should be doing more? How do we process tangled titles in a way that would get to the root? And not only the people who are looking for base assistance repair or in a you know, trying to get a homestead or whatever, but other tangled titles that before they get to that point, so that we don't have to then try to jump through hoops and have that process start at that time.
I think it needs to be a multi, you know, entity operation. Lying just on the Register of Wills is a little bit challenging, but we're doing our best to provide as much information possible to the constituents to you know, resolve the situation. You know, resources to legal services, to education are the best way to combat this.
Because it seems like one of the biggest challenges is finding heirs, right? Locating people. And if you can't find them, once you do find them, you have to get them to sign off. Would there be a third party, somebody helping find these folks? I know you said you were going to hire some people to do some research, but I know there's organizations and companies that do this also. Is that something that would be added to this?
So that's something that the title clearance unit under the registers program will be conducting air search through various agencies. We'll be ensuring that all heirs are identified as the estate moves forward.
All right, because at that point, once that's done, then once you find them, right, then, you know, the process still takes a while to go through. And in a year, you said we did 60?
60.
So there's still a lot more to do, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of work. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this proposal holds forth and what we could do to assist. But obviously, it's a challenge for not only, you know, the people who are going through it, but we see it happening time and time again. And we talk about wills, right? As far as a knowledge point, and I think that's where we go into the community outreach, a lot of people don't even think about that, right? Even, you know, you hear the folks that are, somebody dies and then nobody knows who the house is left to. At that point, if we could do the will part too, will help us in the future to hopefully offset the number of tangled titles in the future. So I think it's a two-pronged approach, and looking forward to trying to see how we could help with you moving forward to do that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, colleague. The chair now recognizes Councilmember Landau.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions. Thank you. And I'm getting excited about this title clearance unit. I'm hoping that you can resolve some of the administrative parts first, especially how that could even help the legal services agencies before you send it to them. If you've got everybody lined up on what they need, I think that could be really helpful. I wanted to talk about intermediary estates. So a client who comes to you has to probate their deceased parent's estate before the title can get transferred. And I know that VIP came up with an affidavit that they used to use to bypass that process, but that your office is not recognizing that. And I just wanted to hear more about that. I think the quicker we can make this process happen, legally, obviously, the better. And we just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Good morning, council member. My name is Frank Campisi. I'm the solicitor here at the Register of Wills office. So the intermediary estate affidavit was created during the last administration, or proposed during the last administration. And there were some of us in the office that were concerned because for 50 plus years, that issue did not exist. So here's the concern. When you have an estate, so for example, a mom passes away with 4 children, okay? And let's name the children A, B, C, and D. So mom has died 30 years ago, and since subsequent to her death, A has died, B has died, C has died, and they all have children. So now D is the sole remaining quote-unquote live heir, and they want to sell mom's house. So normally the practice is you have to open up the estates for A, B, and C, because who's going to speak for A, B, and C other than their heirs? So they have estates, they have heirs. So the affidavit of intermediary estates was going to, in essence, kind of skip the opening of the estates for A, B, and C. The problem comes in with respect to that issue is, have all the heirs been notified of A, B, and C? Have they all agreed? Does the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania get their inheritance taxes for A, B, and C? So typically what we've done in the office, and we've been doing it for years, is making sure that everyone is treated equally. So the estates for A has to be open, B has to be open, C has to be open. And if you have the cooperation of the heirs, it is not that difficult to do. It's just an additional step that needs to be taken, unfortunately, but that is for us to ensure that the proper people are getting their proper share of the estates.
Okay. You have to, I know you have to do renunciations for all the heirs, but after that part, it seems that we do not have to do all of these steps in the process? Some of this that I think you can bypass.
Well, again, by bypassing the estates, you run the risk of making sure that certain individual members who are entitled to their share do not get it. But we have resolutions for that. We have the ability to file a petition for citation to cite individuals who are not cooperating and to get their cooperation if they're not going to. That's the department that I head, which is the legal department. But by bypassing these intermediary states, you run the risk of the Commonwealth not getting their taxes, and you run the risk of individuals not getting their share. So we try to avoid them.
Okay, I
By
still think you
insisting-
can do,
by
I
insisting
hear
that the
you, and I
estates be
still
open.
think we can do a lot of this by renunciation. I also think some of this is not taxable anyway. I would really look forward to talking to you more about this. I think this is an incredibly complicated and long process.
It is.
That there are probably things that we can do internally to streamline it. And in the meantime, we have all this great outreach that's going to happen to get people to even write the most basic wills. I feel like it's something that we can overcome here in Philadelphia if we have all hands on deck, and I know that we're all ready to be here to work with you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? All right, Mr. Sabatini, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule for your testimony, and also we just want to give a shout out to you. Where's Joe? You didn't bring Joe Williams today? No? I don't understand, but give Joe my regards as well, and we definitely look forward to working with you and following up on this most critical issue regarding equity and generational wealth and making sure that we address the issue of tangled titles. So just thank you for your leadership, okay, sir?
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Ms. Lawhead, will you please call the next department, please, for public testimony?
Yes, the Office of Homeless Services.
Good morning. How you doing today, Adam? How are you?
Good morning, Council President and members of Council. I'm Adam Teal, Managing Director, joined by our Deputy Managing Director for Health and Human Services, Crystal Yates Gale, and of course, David Holloman, our Director for the Office of Homeless Services.
Good. Thank you very much. So I'm going to get right into it. So I think the last time we were here, we wanted to address the mismanagement of how contracts were, the accounting and contract process, and how that whole fiasco resulted in the investigation from the Office of Inspector General. And so we know since that time, there's been a press release, press conference talking about no wrongdoing done, which is okay, and I think the investigation is still going on. But my line of question is, what are we going to do different to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future? And I know it was kind of like the last person said, we did everything we could to help people. So in the spirit of helping people, the rules go out the window. Now, I know that was King Ida Johnson, right? If I wanted to say in the spirit of addressing gun violence in the city of Philadelphia, or addressing the issue of institutional and systematic racism in the city of Philadelphia, all the rules go out the window, and I'm just going to rob Peter to pay Paul, and I think I would probably be in a different situation, right? And so I just want to get an idea, what are we doing differently? What systems are going to be in place to make sure when the administration came, they asked us for a significant investment during our mid-year transfer, and all we asked was, we see some accounting defects in before we send this money over. Like, we don't want to be complicit in anything. We just want to see a plan in good faith. And so what are we doing differently, and what has been done to address the accounting practices, as well as making sure that as we move forward, we just being good fiscal stewards of the taxpayer dollars?
Council President, appreciate the question, and we certainly understand Council's concerns and appreciate Council members' work to bring these matters to our attention originally. Obviously, a couple of us here, really all of us here, can't necessarily speak to how we got in the place that we're in.
Adam, if you don't mind, I know you're the boss, right? Is it okay if we talk to the executive director, David Holloman, says it was under his watch, and he was actually in the middle of it, and I think even moving forward, he's probably going to be reporting to you how, as the point person, he went about right-sizing the process. Respectfully, if that's okay, Adam.
Council President, I think the question that you're asking is about what we are going to do in the future, what we are doing now in the present, and what we are doing in the future. And I think that question is probably respectfully best answered by our Deputy Managing Director or me. We are currently in search of new leadership for the Office of Homeless Services.
So it won't be Mr. Holloman moving forward?
Mr. Holloman right now is the interim director. We are currently doing a national search, and we are also bringing aboard, in addition to the detailed financial investigation that you know is underway, we are also bringing on additional independent parties to look at how we can change and rebuild the fiscal and management practices of the Office of Homeless Services, which is a critical agency for our entire city going forward. I think to the extent we want to talk about the future,
yes,
that may or may not be a question for Mr. Holloman. If we want to talk some more about how we got here, at least our current understanding, we can certainly talk to him, and our Inspector General is also here.
I would like to talk about how we move forward, right? I'm just saying, if he's going to be the person, it's kind of like you speaking for him, unless he's not going to be available to do this work anymore. That's why I was really looking forward to seeing David say, hey, I've been here, I know the system in and out. Here's the game plan in terms of how we're going to move forward. Here's the things that I put in place that this won't happen anymore. I think the body at least deserves to hear from him. And you can also chime in and be supportive of him, but like at the end of the day, the buck stops with him, and then he'll report to you as his boss. I mean, I guess if that's the hierarchy and the protocol works. I mean, he's kind of shaking his head like, yes, that's correct. So I think it would be prudent to this body that he will be allowed to just answer the questions on what he's going to do. And if you think he's going in the wrong direction, maybe whisper in his ear and say, no, don't say that, or say this, or we're going to help you get to the next level conversation, Adam. And I don't want to do the back and forth with you, Adam. I'm just trying to get some answers from the gentleman that's running the ship right now as the interim director.
Council President, I certainly respect that and have no issues. I think Mr. Holloman has provided dedicated service to this agency for a long time. He continues to do so. And we certainly expect to continue to have his expertise going forward, albeit not in this current role as the director.
Okay. Gotcha.
It is also, I think, important to note that we are all hands on deck to help fix this agency forward. The work is vital, it's critical. There are dedicated women and men working this agency every day. And in addition to us, who you see here, we are bringing on other independent consultants. We have our Inspector General. We have other folks who are looking into the financial matters. So the short answer to your question is we are changing essentially everything about how OHS does business, except for its vital mission. That said, if you want to hear from Director Holloman about some of the things we are doing now,
that's all I was asking, sir.
Or Deputy Managing Director Yates Gale,
Okay.
who is personally reviewing every invoice right now for services, as one example, we can certainly do that.
Thank you. Mr. David, how you doing, sir? Hope all is well. It's good to see you again. And I know David, just so you know for the record, David has helped us in a variety of different constituent services. So this isn't a thing of us, it's not personal. but at the same time, we have a responsibility to do what we need to do to make sure that we're fiscally sound as it relates to this particular department of moving the city of Philadelphia forward. So in working with your team, David, what are you looking at for the time that you will be in this position moving forward? What are the key things that you're going to be doing differently? What systems are you going to be putting in place to make sure that we're moving the Office of Homeless Services forward in a fiscally sound way? It's a real simple question.
Good morning, Council President.
Good morning.
And members of City Council. For the record, my name is David Holloman, Interim Executive Director for the Office of Homeless Services. Let me first start saying that we will not move forward with any contract that does not have budgetary authority. That's first and foremost. Since I took this position over in October, the first thing we did immediately was look at every contract that were overly committed, and immediately, again, started from January 1st, moving from a calendar year contract to immediately getting back to fiscal year 25 by administering 6 months contract with the aim to start city fiscal contracting year July 1st.
In terms of the process around, separate from the contracting, let's talk about the accounting practices in terms of your team and how y'all move forward. What systems will be in place that will be different now than it was before, just around the accounting?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, again, we have to stay within our budgetary means. I'm someone who loves to help everyone, but again, I understand that we're demonstrating with limited resources. And so the first and foremost thing is that we need to identify those programs that get the most bang for our buck with staying within the budgetary limits. And that means programs, again, that are funded. Most of the general fund obligation is for 1 year, and so we have to think strategically by setting up contingency plan if federal funds or state funds is not available to continue to support those programs. However, we need to be very diligent in our approach of looking at programs that get the most bang for our bucks and staying within the budgetary means.
Thank you very much. In terms of, now Adam, you might chime in on this one. In terms of the triage centers, what is the role that the Office of Homeless Services will play in terms of the triage centers? I know we just opened up one, well, we're expanding one in Fairmount, right? And there's a combination of, is it addiction services related or just for homelessness individuals? Can the two of you just elaborate on what that plan looks like? Will there be support for those who may have addictions, those who may need support when it comes to getting their lives back together with any types of substance abuse, or is it just generally related to those who just may be homeless?
Council President, appreciate the question. I'm going to let our Deputy Managing Director for Health and Human Services, Crystal Yates-Gale, answer it.
Good morning, Council President.
Good morning.
Council members, my name is Crystal Yates-Gale. I'm the Deputy Managing Director of Health and Human Services. And the answer to the question of whether the Office of Homeless Services will play a vital role in the wellness initiative that we're doing around substance use and chronic homelessness in Philadelphia, they absolutely will be at the table, along with all of our other partners and agencies that have a stake in making sure that we serve our residents well.
Okay, just as it relates to the expansion of 48 beds at Fairmount, in Fairmount, and what's the actual name of the actual facility? I used to be a security guard there a long, long time ago. What's the name of it?
So the previous facility's name was Philadelphia Nursing Home.
Yeah, nursing home.
It is now Philly House at Girard.
Okay. And just give me an idea in terms, I have to ask on behalf of my colleague, Councilmember Jeffrey J. Young, what is the community outreach plan as it relates to just letting folks know that we're expanding, this is what we're doing, just so we can separate fact from fiction in terms of what they may see printed versus the facts that when you may call me and say, hey, Council President, here's the facts of what's actually happening. And so what's the plan just to reach out to the wider community? And will there be a community meeting where people can chime in and say, hey, what is this going to look like down the line? Because there's a lot of rumors and not I call some of it may be fiction, some of it may be fact, but until there's a wider community meeting in that particular part of Fairmount so people can know, then at least they will be kind of rest assured that we're crossing our T's, dotting our I's, and everybody is comfortable as it relates to what's actually coming.
So I'll start. I'm sure the managing director will finish, but the two of us have met with every person that has reached out to us via email or telephone to have a meeting about our plans for the wellness initiative. We are more than happy to meet with the community in the Fairmount area and would love to talk to them and dispel some of the rumors. We also conducted a charrette or design thinking exercise with many stakeholders, including health systems, some of the advocacy groups, some of the providers and the homeless providers and behavioral health providers to meet to get the answers to some of the questions about what are we missing, what is it that we don't know that we think we know. So we're more than willing to meet with anybody to talk about these programs.
Council President, council members, with respect to Philly Home at Girard, the former Philadelphia nursing home, since 2014, there have actually been somewhere between 100 and 300 residents of that facility on site. So for almost a decade, that facility has been used as a shelter for unhoused individuals. And as one might expect, those folks come to the facility with a variety of needs. They are individuals, they are human beings. These are folks who have become unhoused through a variety of mechanisms. And it is a difficult challenge for us to face in that we don't necessarily have other places for these folks to go. Just last night, we actually had 2 apartment buildings in the city that experienced fires or other incidents. So we currently are operating a shelter at West Philadelphia High School. These are not uncommon occurrences. We all understand the need, and we know council's been very supportive of the need for temporary shelters for unhoused individuals. And what we are doing, and for the record, it is now 90 beds that we have, 90 additional beds that we have
90
available.
additional, not 48.
Yeah, it was 48 the other day, it's 90.
90 now, okay.
We recognize the need. We have certainly heard from folks in many communities around the city that we want as a city to have better places for folks to go for long-term care, treatment, and housing than our streets or vacant buildings or some of the other places where they are currently found. And we are aggressively moving out to do that by expanding existing services at existing facilities, either city-operated, city-owned, or with existing city contractors and providers, even as we create the plan that we have committed to sitting down and showing you all as we are doing our due diligence on larger facilities for wellness, for long-term wellness, to address the gaps that we have all talked about over the years.
Thank you very much.
Specific to that facility, I think you've seen, we've invested a lot. Just over there the other day, again, we're sensitive to the community concerns. There is a the security force over there, we have a security force inside that perimeter. They are on point. Very impressed by the folks working over there, very impressed by the providers working over there. These are credible, experienced, diverse providers that we have over there to serve the 200 essentially longer-term residents, plus folks that we are bringing in who have a need for these expanded services. We've done the landscaping. I mean, really, I think the alternative to what we're doing there with this investment and truly ensuring that this facility provides the dignity that Mayor Parker's been very clear as we are helping folks get into the longer-term care continuum. We want to do that with dignity. I think that the facility is in better shape probably than it's ever been. We are continuing to invest in it to make sure that we have a place for folks in the interim while we are building this larger continuum of care at our wellness facilities around the city.
Okay. And this last question before I release to my members. And in terms of addressing the community case management support for individuals who's coming for long term, is methadone available for them? Is obviously the Narcan set up, the fentanyl treatment, I heard something about individuals who now when they get high, they have like these wounds that's supposed to be like totally, in some cases, very, very delicate and difficult to deal with. Will those type of services be there to assist individuals? And are those services provided there different than places like the Otley House that's in my district in Southwest Philadelphia? So what would be the difference between services that's provided at the Otley House versus services that's provided at this particular facility?
Council President, you're right on it. We need to provide that full range of services. Folks are different. They have different needs. You know, for a couple of us here who have been healthcare providers, if there's one thing we've learned over the years, it's treat the patient and make sure that you have what is needed for that particular patient. So yes, when we're talking about expanded services, we're talking about ensuring that medication-assisted treatment is available, that wound care is available to a certain point. If the need is beyond that point, then again, we are building this ecosystem of facilities so we can get folks to the right place for the right care, for the right time, until they are back on their feet and can have access to economic opportunity. The range of services at that entire, in the ecosystem that exists today, it's different depending on the facility. We know that we don't have the capacity in certain areas, and that's why we're really working aggressively to build out what we have, even as we work on this vision and this plan for a more comprehensive set of wellness centers in the city.
And just one other question. When it comes to partnering with like longer term treatment facilities like Eagleville, Evergreen, are we thinking about having them at the table for the person that needs to do 60, 90-day treatment, right, away from the city of Philadelphia? How is that playing? And I would think that would be part of your plan for folks who really need long-term treatment. Then also, are we looking at partnering with First Judicial District Treatment Court, where folks may come from? Now, I'm talking about Kensington now, and just in general, but I know a lot, once we clean up Kensington and address their issues, as opposed to people going to jail, they may go to treatment court where there's mandatory treatment, and when your treatment is done, your record gets expunged, but it's based upon you doing, group therapy, making sure that your overall treatment approach is completed. And so give me an idea, how does that part work in terms of the overall long-term plan?
Council President, you're exactly right. We are, and this is why it is so complicated to build this connected ecosystem of care, which right now there are various aspects of it which do exist. They're not necessarily connected. And if there's one thing we've heard over and over, we're losing folks in the handoffs. So what we are trying to do, and this is why it's taking a little while, although I would say we're doing this at lightning speed, considering it's never been done anywhere else in the country to join this system up in the way that we're contemplating. Yes, we are looking at other partners and other facilities that can treat and take care of patients for wherever they are in their continuum of long-term care, treatment, and housing. And as far as the treatment court, our colleagues in the Office of Public Safety are absolutely talking with the First Judicial District about, and other partners, the DA's office and others, about how to accomplish that, because we know that's a critical aspect. Even if we provide this capacity that we know is needed, we need to have ways to get folks into it. What we're seeing is, even as we're building this out, we're seeing folks who are a lot of interest in what we're building among folks who have these needs. So we are hopeful that as we build it, they will come.
Okay. Thank you very much, Adam. And look forward to the plan. I know it is a big undertaking, so I do commend you and your team for actually going and actually addressing it, because it's probably one of them things where if you want to pick and choose things to address, you going into it already knowing you're changing a mindset and a culture of individuals that have some very, very dire issues, to be quite frank. Just David, one last question. I know part of the issue and the concern was when we address the accounting issues as it relates to and some of the accounting practices as relates to us sending money to OHS. And I know you said you want to do an evaluation of certain organizations maybe doing better work than others. How are you handling that? Because one of the main concerns were, you know, we also don't want to shut money off to organizations that are supporting the homeless, right? That was the conundrum. On one end, you know, we can't be complicit in terms of any types of funds not being used in the proper manner, right? And not being used in terms of good fiscal, sound accounting policies. But we also don't want to be in a predicament where you're holding money from a particular nonprofit organization that's actually out there helping people day in and day out. So how are we dealing with that last part, David? And that's all I have.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me? Absolutely, you're absolutely right. We want to make sure, one, that we're paying all of the providers that are rendering great services. The one thing that we're doing immediately and is continuing to do right now is evaluating all of the programs and providers that are actually doing really, really great work. And I would say the majority do a really, really great job, but there are areas that we need to improve upon. We hope with our new boots on the ground strategy that we will, one, provide technical assistance, but identify those providers who are not meeting the standards that folks deserving to have. The other thing that we wanted to do also, and I know we talked about this last, is to RFP out our contracts to providers and make it a competitive field to make sure that we're paying for good quality services throughout our entire system.
Thank you, David. The chair recognizes Councilman Jamie Gaudier.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning, Managing Director Teal, Deputy Managing Director Yates-Gale, and Interim Director Holloman. And thanks to the Council President for the great line of questioning about what we're changing from a process perspective to get to a different place. Despite the recent controversies that were noted, we cannot deny the fact that the Office of Homeless Services fills a critical need in the city. And as homelessness becomes a more urgent and widespread issue, we need to ensure that the department has the tools it needs to serve our neighbors who don't have a place to call home. It is true that over the last year, as a result of her very thorough and attentive work, the Majority Leader uncovered some very troubling issues with OHS spending. These problems are being investigated by the Inspector General and an independent accounting firm retained by the Mayor. We do recognize that some progress is being made, as we heard. OHS fell behind in paying its vendors due to the outsized need for beds and additional security for shelters that arose during the pandemic, and at least at this point, 75% of those vendors have been paid. However, much more needs to be done, and at the conclusion of the investigations, we will need to see more transparency, accountability, as well as good reporting from the department. At the same time, the problem of homelessness has not been put on pause while the investigations are ongoing. Very recently, the 3rd District was in the news because of a fire that broke out in the Malcolm X Park bathrooms, just as an example. We strongly suspect that this fire broke out due to unhoused people trying to live in the bathrooms, which has been happening for over a year now. And as the summer approaches, we are likely going to see more people living in tents around the city. And all of these individuals need and deserve our help, as well as access to housing. So while we get the office back on the right financial track, it is important that we don't allow the most vulnerable population in our city, the unhoused, to suffer through no fault of their own. And with that, I have a few questions about the budget proposal. OHS is asking for an additional $16.1 million for FY25 to maintain its current levels of service. Can you paint a picture of what will happen to homeless services in the city if OHS does not get this money? How many fewer individuals will be served without this additional funding? How many organizations will lose their contracts without this additional funding? What neighborhoods and areas would be hit the hardest? And if you are provided the additional $16.1 million, can you tell us how this money will be allocated, what services or contracts will it fund, and how many people will it serve? And I can repeat those if you didn't get them all.
Thank you for your question, Councilwoman. As you have stated, homelessness is on the rise. Based on national, we are seeing a 12% rise in unsheltered homelessness in the city of Philadelphia. That $16.1 million that we're requesting is to provide and maintain current levels of services. Any funding that does not support that, we're talking about, we had a contingency plan of 1, 2, and 3. Their doomsday budget will allow us to take off anywhere between 400 to 500 beds, and these are emergency and temporary housing beds that support people who directly are unsheltered on the street. As you are aware, many of the programs that were established in the last couple of years, we brought up for seniors, where we have seen an elevation of more seniors starting to experience homelessness as a result of, one, affordable housing, the lack of access to nursing home and other levels of care, and unfortunately, the Office of Homeless Services stepped in and provided a critical needs services. And so all of those options would be on the table. And so we estimate, again, with a reduction in funding, anywhere between 400 to 500 beds. We know as we're preparing to submit our HUD point-in-time data to HUD by this Friday, that we believe that the numbers are up. And so that number is not going to go away, as you had indicated. Homelessness does not stay steady. People have complicated lives, and I wish that we ever can come to a point where we're not talking about people who are experiencing homelessness.
Can you, if you know anything about where you think that point in time number will be, can you talk about that and how that has changed? Can you also, can I ask you to expound upon the first, second, and third contingency plans that you were drawing out? What does that look like, and who and where would that impact?
Yeah, absolutely. In 2023, our point-in-time unsheltered count was 706 individuals on the street. We believe right now that number is anywhere between 900 to 1,000. We're finalizing the details, but that's what it's looking like right now. Budget cut scenario 1, as we have stated, we were projected to be $5 million over budget for FY24. With some of the plans that we put in place by reducing some of the contract that we're underspending, we were able to hopefully shave off that $5 million, but most of those cuts will come directly from emergency and temporary housing, as I laid out before. We took an approach of reduction of contracts that we were seeing as underspending, which many of our providers are underspending because they're dealing with personnel challenges, just like the city of Philadelphia. 2, there has been a number of rising costs due to inflation. We have seen food costs go up. We have seen just fringe benefits go up in a number of our providers. But we also have took a straight across the board cut, which is about anywhere between 11 to 12%. And that gets us to where I was saying about 400 to 500 beds capacity if we had to see a reduction of that $5 million that we were requesting in the mid-year transfer. I want to be very clear. In the FY25, we were projected to lose $9.6 million. We asked for that additional 5 to maintain current levels of services. And so we put a scenario in place that will reflect not getting the total 16, not getting the 9.6 that is due to come out, and not getting the 5 million. So there's various scenario cuts that lays out the variation of how many beds will be taken offline.
So just to put a finer point on that, if you are not able to get the $16.1 million that OHS has requested at a time when both the point-in-time count has gone up and where we're planning to do a sweep in Kensington, we would lose access to up to 500 beds that could serve as temporary and emergency shelter for people. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Council President.
You're welcome. The chair recognizes, how much did you say you're going to lose? Number-wise, did you say 5 million in FY25?
In FY25, we were scheduled based on the previous 5-year spending plan to have a budget reduction of $9.6 million.
9.6 million. And was that from the previous administration's
That's-
five-year plan?
that
Or the
was
Kenny
from-
administration
From the Kenny
five-year plan?
administration,
Okay,
yes.
that's good to know. Okay, thank you. The chair recognizes Majority Leader Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Kathy,
Council President.
take the chair and
Surely,
address your questions
surely.
from the chair,
Okay,
please.
we'll take just a very brief recess so I can move on my documents. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here today. I appreciate this opportunity for the callback with a few additional questions. First, my colleague, our Chair of Housing and Homeless Services, already asked about the $16 million additional request that we originally received on March 13th of 2024 in the original budget and brief, $16 million for FY25. Thank you very, very much for the responses that we received this morning at 9:21 prior to the 10 a.m. hearing. I was just reviewing that information here while we were in the hearing. Relative to the $16 million request, you all sent us a document this morning stating the total is $15,890,534 with a total bed count of 563 and a total number of direct service staff of 87. The difference between the $16.1 million in total is the $187,986 reduction mentioned on line 4 plus rounding. And so, as I'm reviewing these documents in chambers, and I apologize I wasn't able to review them further because of the time that we received them at 9:21. I have a question regarding one of the lines, and then I'll go back to my previous questions. Are these current contracts that are underfunded, or are these expanded contracts?
Excuse me, can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
The contracts that you all sent us this morning at 9:21, are these current contracts that are underfunded, or are they expanded contracts?
No, those are contracts that are currently funded, and there's also a reduction in some of the contract to meet what we have budget allocation for.
Okay, and to your point, just reviewing a document that we received from you all last year relative to one of my information requests from November 23rd of 2023. Appendix A states outstanding payments from FY21 through 23 and FY24 overages. Many of these organizations mirror with the same amounts, and so can you just explain to us the new $16 million that you're requesting for fiscal year 25? Are these dollars being requested to deal with contracts that are listed where the amounts match from your November 23rd of 2023 email relative to outstanding payments from FY21 through 23 and FY24 overages, or is this indeed a new $16 million allocation that you're asking for FY25 as your budget and brief states?
Ma'am, thank you for your question. The document that you're referring to that has the outstanding costs or outstanding invoices for fiscal 21 to 23 with a separate column for fiscal 24, those items have been paid. We have submitted and worked very closely with the finance office. We reviewed multiple documents, multiple invoices. We did a lot of reconciliation, and those items have all been submitted in 2 batches The second batch was submitted 2 weeks ago, so some of those payments are still in process. And then we did a separate payment for one particular vendor that we had to do a lot more reconciliation with. So to answer the question, the 16.1 has nothing to do with what was owed. It all has to do with current contracts.
Okay, excellent. And so I'm glad we received that clarification for the record that the 16 million is for FY25. My next question relates to, on the information you all sent us this morning, contract number 2220101, U.S. Facilities is the provider, program name, preventative maintenance, program type, emergency shelter, program description, preventative maintenance at city-owned shelter, city-owned facilities, Oxford Shelter, Migrant Center, and P&H. It's in the amount of $1.4 million. Bed count not available, number of direct service staff not available. In the notes, it states funding to cover maintenance costs at the Philadelphia nursing home. I ask this question because as a member, former member of appropriations under the last term and now as vice chair of appropriations, that's the same dollar amount that we did extend to OHS in the last mid-year transfer under the previous administration. For our clarity, could you just confirm that that 1.4 million is not the same 1.4 million from last year?
That 1.4 million is what we came in for the mid-year transfer to upkeep the maintenance at the Philadelphia nursing home. And so that 1.4 million is again projected for FY25 moving forward to continue with the upkeep and maintenance of Philadelphia nursing home.
Right, I just wanted to make sure we had that for clarity because we did allocate the 1.4 million for the nursing home in the last mid-year appropriation under the last administration, and the amounts were the exact same. Thank you for that clarification. The Office of Inspector General preliminary findings state that the Office of Homeless Services saw a general fund appropriations cut of roughly $17 million from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21. According to your budget details, which are here, OHS received $60,113,037 in fiscal year 20 and $44,781,994 in fiscal year 21. Can you please confirm if those numbers are correct for your general fund allocations?
I believe so, those numbers are correct.
So those numbers are correct. Based on my calculation, the difference between those amounts equal to $15,331,043. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. According to your budget details, OHS received its highest ever contribution in grants revenue in fiscal year 21. In fiscal year 20, OHS received $34,831,951 in grants revenue, and in fiscal year 21, that increased to $77,529,569. And this brought the department's total revenue up from $94,944,988 in fiscal year 20 to $122,311,563 in FY21. Is that correct?
So the 34 or 35 million that you have references here, the Office of Homeless Services received federal funds to accommodate at the height of the COVID pandemic. I believe that 40 million that's additional there that you're referencing is continuum of care federal grants that are allocated for renewal of programs.
Okay, so the OIG's report also states that the majority of your contracts were or would soon be generally eligible for grant funding of some kind. So of the $77 million in grants revenue funding that you all received in fiscal year 21, $39,340,452 was allocated to emergency and temporary housing contracts. So that was nearly $25 million in grants revenue, more than you received in FY20, increasing the unit's overall Class 200 contribution to $67,627,555. Is that correct?
Again, the 35 million that you are referencing here substituted a cut of the 17 million at that time, where 16 really new monies was about 16 million to accommodate programs during the height of the COVID pandemic. I want to be clear that those grants are competitive grants, so it's not guaranteed that you will get those same levels of funding each year.
Right, and I heard the clock, and I will honor the bell. I only asked because the amounts that you all gave us this morning, in addition to the difference between the amounts from the different fiscal years, are almost exactly the same. With that, the chair now recognizes Councilmember Brooks.
Thank you so much, Majority Leader. My question is, it has been reported that the sweeps of Kensington will begin this week. Can you guarantee that there will be enough low-barrier treatment beds for those who want to go into treatment? And I hear a lot of numbers, whether it's 75 or now 90 at the Girard Avenue facility, and that doesn't add up to be the right amount of number of beds needed. And what are the other proposed sites that they will go to? If there are only 90 at Girard, where are the other sites going? And we anticipate more than 90 people being available. And also, can you explain the treatment that the 5 people that are currently at the Girard site are receiving?
Councilmember, appreciate the questions. I think just for clarity's sake, and this is certainly something that could be revisited when our colleagues from the police department are here, what has been posted to happen is an encampment resolution, not a quote-unquote sweep per se. So there is not an idea that somehow folks who are currently unhoused are going to be quote-unquote swept up in any way. That said, you are absolutely correct that, as you've heard from Director Holloman, and as I think we all understand, we don't have enough beds currently with enough capability to address what we believe is the unhoused population of the city and Kensington or anywhere else. And also, it is important that we address their other needs holistically. As far as I mean, you're exactly right. We are looking for and expanding beds with many existing providers. If we haven't done it already, we are currently in negotiations and trying to get that done because we see the need. We certainly feel council's urgency and the urgency from our communities, and we want to make sure that folks are taken care of. With respect to the specific treatment, at the point we start treating people, they become patients. And I can't share specific treatment modalities for patients at the risk of violating federal privacy laws. I think what is important, and you are absolutely correct, is that we are providing the range of treatment options that is necessary, that are necessary for different folks who are coming in with different needs. There are different types of medication-assisted treatment. As you can imagine, some work better for some folks than others. People have different levels of wound care that they need, other types of services. So what you're talking about is exactly what we're trying to do, is make sure that we are expanding services at existing facilities to provide the full range of care that might be needed for folks who are coming in voluntarily to avail themselves of these services, and we hope get on a path to long-term care, treatment, housing, wellness, and eventually jobs.
So my question is, if people, the 5 people that are currently in treatment came voluntarily, how did they know it was available to them when we didn't even know it was open?
Councilmember, our outreach workers from various agencies are always have lists of facilities and the number of beds in those facilities. So as we got to the point where we had additional beds available at existing facilities with enhanced services, we let the outreach workers know, and they can tell folks that those are available.
And the question comes because that morning before we actually found out about the opening of that facility, we got a call that a women's shelter was closed because it was a seasonal bed shelter in the same location. Is this the same exact facility that the 60-bed women's treatment center that was closed because of seasonal treatment was closed? Is it the same, are we talking about the same exact place?
Councilmember, there is no women's treatment facility that was
Not
closed.
treatment, it was a shelter.
Yeah, there's no women's
cold
shelter.
Blue,
Right, what it was, those are winter shelter beds that we have available, obviously through the winter. Those coincidentally, those beds closed on April 30th. The new beds are not those same beds, they are different. So
But right to that point, just because it's no longer cold and those treatment beds is no longer winter, is the assumption that the folks who were originally standing at that location, where are they going? What is the solution for folks that were temporarily sheltered throughout the winter, now that the weather is changing?
Councilmember, we didn't put anybody on the street when those winter beds were closed. There was nobody.
So it wasn't at capacity, there was no one there?
No, ma'am.
When it
I
happened?
guess
Okay.
because of the weather. That said, again, we know that even when we have beds available, there are folks who are reluctant to come in. And part of what we're trying to do with the beds that we're bringing online now is to provide a higher level of care, a higher level of services, and a measure of dignity that perhaps folks have not had in the past. And that's nothing against our current providers or facilities. I think everybody is doing the best they can. As we've talked about before, we are trying to fill in the middle and the long-term space that doesn't exist, and also, even when we're doing things in the short term, to provide more holistic and comprehensive care, as we've discussed with this body several times.
So the current facility that we're talking about is open to anyone that an outreach person may find that's currently homeless in Philadelphia to go to?
Councilmember, when folks are approached by the outreach workers, they have options. So it's not, we provide them the options. Again, these folks are coming in voluntarily, so they're provided with the options at that particular point in time.
So from anywhere in the city, that's my question.
Yes, Councilman, absolutely, that's right. We are, it's another great point that I appreciate. The system that we are building, the ecosystem of wellness that we are building, again, that does not exist anywhere in the nation as far as we know at this scale and with this level of connectivity, is citywide and intended to serve the entire city, not any particular neighborhood individually. And as a result, we are constantly balancing demand and supply across the city and beyond. As you heard the council president talk, we do have agreements with providers who happen to be located outside the city who do provide different levels of care for patients who need that.
Okay. And Majority Leader, I have a question that came from the district council member. Can I ask that question?
Please proceed, and then after that, we'll recognize Councilmember Gaudier.
Thank you. Hold on one second, I lost it. Sorry. The question is about the zoning for this particular site. Would it require any type of variances, and what would those variances need to be for this to happen? Because I know it was a nursing home, then it was used for a shelter. I don't know what the variance for this particular wellness use is. So I think his question is like, what would the variance required or needed for this particular site?
Council members appreciate the question. As we understand the current zoning and codicils attached to that zoning, this is a compatible use with what has been happening at this facility for literally a decade, sheltering unhoused individuals. We are simply expanding the number of beds, elevating the quality of those beds, and providing additional care and services to meet the needs of the population.
But the additional care and services that you're talking about, will they require any additional variances, or they fall under the variance for the nursing home piece that was there prior to?
Council member, the services we are providing now and the way those services are being provided, we believe does not require any additional licensing or regulation. However, there is the possibility, depending on how this entire wellness ecosystem comes together, that we could, in the future, go to the Commonwealth and request licensing for a certain number of beds to provide more intensive treatment services on site at any one of these particular facilities. That is part of the broader conversation as we bring this all together. So that decision has not been made for the Philly home at Girard at this point.
Okay, and some of the questions that we have been reaching out to some of the service providers, and we were told they were unable to speak with us. Is that true?
Councilmember, I certainly think it is a best practice for folks who are contractors or vendors to refer questions to the city when they are city contractors.
We are the city. Aren't we collectively the city? So is the council members that are asking specific questions to the providers about services being told that they are unable to speak with us as council members, trying to get information?
Councilmember, we have certainly not told any of those vendors or service providers that they're not allowed to talk to anybody. So again, I would say...
Thank you for putting that on the record.
Yeah, I would say, having been in that position in the past as a contractor, it is typical to refer those questions to one's client.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Brooks. The chair now recognizes Councilmember Gautier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My next question is sensitive, and I want you to know that I'm not asking it because of any resistance or reluctance to deal with homelessness in the 3rd District. I think that every council member has the responsibility to lean in on this issue. But it is a fact that recently my office has received reports that in anticipation of the clear out of the Kensington encampments, we have a few dozen people at 30th Street Station who have explicitly stated that they came from Kensington. And so my question is, you know, what plan does OHS and the managing director's office have to deal with displacement? The displacement that we're seeing that ended up at 30th Street is in anticipation of the sweep. So it only stands to reason that once we get to May 8th, we're going to see more of that in West Philadelphia and in other places. So one, can you confirm that that's when the sweep is happening, that's what we're going to do as a city, do the sweep on the 8th. And then secondly, can you talk about your plans, because homelessness is never something that's going to just be contained to Kensington, right? We have to have a citywide plan to deal with the issue that we're seeing.
Councilmember, working backwards, certainly appreciate the question and agree completely that we have to build a system that serves the entire city, which is why we are building a wellness ecosystem for long-term care, treatment, and housing to serve the entire city and all of the currently unhoused individuals who need help providing the care that they need, whether they are experiencing substance use disorder or not, whether they are part of a family unit or not, whether they are part of a couple or not, to be able to have the available facilities and services to address them wherever they are today and wherever they might move or end up. I want to say again, or repeat, that the encampment resolution that has been posted is not, as I understand it, a quote-unquote sweep in the way I think folks are characterizing it. It is an encampment resolution. These have been done in the past. They will be done in the future. I would offer any other questions about the specific tactics of the encampment resolution might be best answered by the Philadelphia Police Department. From our perspective, what we are doing clearly, aggressively, and as fast as possible is making sure that we have the available beds with the available services by expanding existing facilities to be ready for folks who may decide, for whatever reason, to come in and get help. Since the posting in Kensington, which happened to be in Kensington, certainly I think you can probably anticipate, we get emails all the time about other quote-unquote encampments around the city. I think you certainly can anticipate that those are also going to start being addressed in a similar fashion in the future, using the framework that has been established for encampment resolutions. And since the posting in Kensington, we've already had 751 engagements in that area. of folks who are looking for options to come in for whatever reason. And so far, 24 placements have occurred simply as from that neighborhood, from that area, or that part of the neighborhood, from that area just since that posting. So I think what we're seeing is, again, as everybody has talked about, and all of your constituents, I know, email you because we are frequently on those same emails. We are trying to create a system that will be able to provide capacity for long-term care, treatment, and wellness all across the city for all the folks who need it, however they get there.
I think my question, and I'm happy to let the Deputy Managing Director provide more details, what makes us ready to do this on the 8th? And I want to know how that readiness not only extends to the encampment resolution, but extends to a logical migration. It makes a lot of sense that folks would go to 30th Street, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to get to, and you know, a place where a lot of people are that could potentially help folks. So what makes us ready to deal with that, displacement, and what plans do we already have in place to deal with that starting from, 2 days from now?
Councilmember, again, our plan is to add as many beds as possible, as quickly as possible, with the range of services available. This is why when I answered the Council President's question earlier, the 48 beds last week at Philly Home at Girard is now 90 beds. And that is to be able to accommodate folks who are coming in from any area of the city, not just any particular neighborhood. We are similarly expanding beds and services at other existing facilities around the city. We have a number of these facilities that are already being used for this purpose, run by credible, experienced, compassionate providers. And at the same time, we are continuing to work very aggressively on a plan that we will present to Council before the end of this month on a broader implementation strategy for expanded wellness services and facilities in the city. So that's what the $100 million initial capital investment is intended to help us do, is build that longer term capacity, while right now, to address this interim condition and the urgency that is on the street, we are expanding beds everywhere we can, literally around the clock, in concert with our providers, our dedicated outreach workers, multiple agencies, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I look forward to working with you. And again, please don't interpret this as any reluctance to serve unhoused people in the 3rd District or wherever. I want to serve people better, right? And I look forward to working with MDO and OHS towards that goal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you so much, colleague. I wanted to take a moment to recognize the presence of a former councilwoman and former chair of City Council's Committee on Housing and Homeless Services, Janie Blackwell, who has joined us today. Thank you for your commitment to our homeless community and unhoused population for years and years on end. We certainly appreciate your presence today. The chair now recognizes Councilmember Ahmad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Complicated matters, and I commend all of you for taking it on. If not us, then who, right? And I want to thank the mayor for being proactive on this. Obviously, the devil is in the details and how it's going to roll out. I had a few questions about how the Housing First policy connects to those with substance disorder, and how we sort of translate that into a detox center, to a long-term care, to a warm handoff after that. What is that continuum, and how do we take people who are being housed but then need these services? If you could explain that.
Councilmember, I appreciate the question, and yes, certainly it is a complicated system, perhaps even complex, that we're trying to build right now. The short answer to your question, as with many complex systems, is it depends. So it really depends on the particular needs and the particular place that that individual is in. And I mean place in terms of their physical location as well as how they are thinking about their future. So our goal, what we've heard over and over as we've met with healthcare providers, healthcare systems, is there isn't necessarily today a joined up way for folks to move through that system. We have a lot of very dedicated folks out there who are quite literally saving lives around the clock, and we expect that work to continue. And when folks do come in for treatment, what we've heard over and over is even after a couple initial rounds of treatment, they may or may not have the supports they need to move to the next, to sort of level up and move to the next phase. So that's what we're trying to build, is trying to connect the existing components of this system, build new ones at scale that don't exist today or don't exist at the capacity that we need, because they do. We do have places that can provide either individually or through partnerships that can provide some of these services or even all of these services in one place. What we are trying to do is, in addition to housing first, we're trying to, once we get folks in, we want to be able to connect them to all the services they might need for as long as they might need it, help them go through the system and not lose people in the handoffs, because that seems to be what's happening today.
The feedback I am getting from folks has been that it's not just the detox, it's the next step that is unavailable or disconnected, and so the cycle starts all over again. And how intentional are we being in this plan that you're rolling out? Because you guys are connecting with you don't do direct services outside of your homeless outreach, if I'm correct. And then the actual service is some other provider. So you're sort of the middle person connecting. So we just want to make that plan is tight, and and most importantly, how are we connecting and communicating with those who will need the services, instead of having what we heard, people scattering all over the place because they're hearing something is coming. How much intentionality has been to inform the clients who will need that work? How much, outside of just some service worker going around, is there any other plan that we are using to make sure people know there's a coordinated plan coming out, your needs are going to be met, you're going to have detox, but then after detox there's going to be more, and how that detox is done also. A lot of our providers are just doing part of it and letting people go. So I just wanted to assure our constituents who happen to be unhoused and have substance disorder, or just unhoused without the disorder, anybody who's in that position, how clear is our communication to them of what you're doing? Because the communication to us has not been very clear. I gather you're, flying the plane and building it at the same time. I get that. But if we can share as much with the constituents who are going to be impacted by that, that will make everything so much calmer and better and humane. And that's what I want to see, where that plan is in how intentional we are about doing that.
Councilmember, appreciate that. Please rest assured that we are putting care at the center of this entire ecosystem that we are building. Care for the individuals who are unhoused and or experiencing substance use disorder or whatever other challenges they have. And, I think equally important, care for our communities. Our communities that are around these facilities, our communities that are experiencing the spillover effects of many of these challenges. As far as outreach goes, I think we've already seen some real success from the, again, having a little experience in this and building capacity, on the street and areas of need. We really have seen the value of building trust from a healthcare perspective, building trust with folks, and that can be a long-term. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. Sometimes it's multiple conversations. It's talking with folks, maybe saving their life one day with naloxone and the next time seeing them and talking about the options that are available. Already, as we've brought on additional options, options specifically for couples housing, we know that we've gotten a few couples in to some of our new beds who were not coming in because they could not stay together. So we are already trying to provide more variety in terms of the arrangements, more of the services, and also in a way that is compassionate to the clients, the patients, and the communities, certainly to the extent that we think we can benefit from communication beyond those kind of peer engagements, those face-to-face engagements by our dedicated outreach workers. We will certainly do that.
Thank you, and I look forward to the detailed plan that you're going to provide to us, and hope it's a continuum and not disconnected, because that's what's been the experience in the past. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Ahmad, for your questions. Also wanted to recognize the group we have here today, ACT UP. Thank you all so much for joining us for this hearing. Thank you very much for being here. Chair now recognizes Councilmember Thomas.
Good afternoon. Just some questions for clarity. Let me go back to Councilmember Brooks' question. Councilmember Brooks asked about communication with contractors, and based on the response I've heard, you are very comfortable with contractors communicating with council members. Who's not permitted to communicate with us? Like, who involved in this whole ordeal have you asked to not communicate with city council, but rather bring that information directly through your office so we know who's allowed to communicate with us and who's not permitted to communicate directly with us?
Council, member, I have not asked anybody not to communicate with city council or anybody else.
Okay, so all staff, any questions we have as it relates to going through things that have happened in the past, you all have no problem with us reaching out to contractors, departments, staff members to figure out what's going on? Because I'm just getting a different impression here. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, council member, I'm not sure I would say we have no problem with that. I think the challenge is sometimes people in organizations see their piece of the organization and may not see the entire scope and scale of the organization, and may or may not be completely aware of other things that are happening, particularly in a time that is very dynamic when we are trying to create a system that doesn't exist anywhere else. So I think certainly you may feel free to talk with whomever you desire. I certainly wouldn't necessarily believe, and here I'm certainly preaching to the choir and talking with city council members, everything you hear.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure that we had clarity on our end, because again, this is a very confusing situation that we're involved in. We're trying to navigate it in a way that's in the best interest of Philadelphians. May 8th, this May 8th date that I'm hearing in today's hearing, when was this date communicated to City Council that this would be the time where we would begin to see some type of action in Kensington? When was that communicated to us, and how did we get that message?
Council member, the date, there was a posting that is in accordance with the procedure for encampment resolutions. So that's a public posting.
Okay, so it wasn't like a direct communication to City Council, just letting us know that this was taking place and asking maybe for our insight, input, suggestions, and things like that. That didn't happen.
Council member, I can't speak to whether that happened or not. It certainly didn't come from me.
Awesome, thank you. So as it relates to the resolution, I spent a lot of time in Kensington. I know my colleagues know that I'm down there a lot. I'm hearing that you're going to be focusing on the corridor, the business corridor, as well as some residential spaces. What about the places that people encamp in Kensington that are not business corridors and are not residential facilities? What is the plan for those encampment sites?
Council member, I think probably any questions about specific plans going forward for encampment resolutions are maybe best asked of the police department or our Office of Public Safety. I would say that.
So the police department is determining where we go?
Well, I think you're asking about tactics, which.
No. So I'm going to be clear. I heard your question earlier when you talked about, I think Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke asked about a tactic and care. And I heard you say reference the police for that. I'm talking about strategy, right? Like, so I understand that you're focused on a few block radius. I'm asking about places that don't come within. I'm not talking about how you remove people. I'm talking about where you're targeting. So I'm hearing that you're targeting a lot of residential and business corridors. I'm asking about the encampments in Kensington that are not near any residents and that are not near any business corridor. What's the plan for those areas?
Council member, I think this is the first encampment resolution of this administration. I would expect there will be more.
So what's the plan for the areas that's not business and residential field? So do we not have a plan for that yet? Are we not thinking about those areas? Are we targeting this area first and then going to those areas?
Council member, we are thinking about every area in the city, and certainly probably not a day goes by that we don't get information about, information or complaints about a particular encampment in a particular location. And I think as we are building out, and this goes to Councilmember's earlier point, as we are building out this broader system, we need to make sure these things are going together so we don't overload our capacity. We want to make sure that we have the capacity as we continue to resolve encampments and address other areas where unhoused individuals congregate, that we have the available, compassionate, comprehensive care and services that they need available. So when they come in, we will keep them in the system, move them through the system, and get them out the other side, hopefully, in a better place with access to economic opportunity.
So I'm thinking about what Councilmember Gaudier asked, and she talked about people relocating. She said that people will go into 30th Street because they are aware of some of the things that's going to happen in May. I spend a lot of time in Kensington. I'm thinking about the people who are going to go to the railroad tracks, the people who are going to go underneath I-95. I don't think people are going to just sit there and let you sweep them away. You said that you had 750 engagements from people in Kensington that are looking for support. The 750 number is curious to me because we heard that there are 750 people living on the streets in Kensington. So based on the number of people who have engaged, as well as the information that you gave us as it relates to the people in Kensington, one would get the impression that every person who lives on the streets in Kensington has reached out for some type of engagement. So just listening to what you talked about today, where did the 750 number come from as it relates to people who live on the streets in Kensington? And based on the 750 engagement that you have had, can you just kind of go in depth a little bit? It's just a crazy coincidence that it's 750 people estimated to live in Kensington, while simultaneously 750 people have engaged from Kensington looking for support. So kind of help us with a little clarity with that.
Councilmember, appreciate that. First, the 751 engagements are not unique individuals. So you can certainly engage over a period of days. You may engage with somebody, the same individual, multiple times. So that is why that number does not necessarily map to the number of individuals. I think the key point that you made that I certainly will reinforce is estimated. All of our estimates of the unhoused population in Philadelphia are exactly that, estimates. So this is also why we are building a system as fast as we can with all of these services to be able to accommodate what will ultimately be the population that we need to serve. And I also want to be really clear about this. We are not looking to quote unquote sweep people away or anywhere. We're not sweeping them away. If we want to, what we are trying to do is get folks the access that they need to housing, long-term care, treatment, and economic opportunity. That is what we are trying to do in a comprehensive, holistic, joined-up way, because we all know that is not possible today.
Well, thank you for that. And I think that City Council shares your vision as it relates to the idea of getting people the support systems they need. I just think that we don't have a whole lot of clarity. Clearly, on your end, you know a lot more about this plan than what we know about the plan. And so for us, we're looking to do something as a city that we've never seen before. And I think that on our end, we're just a little reluctant because there are holes that we know that needs to be filled. And we communicate those holes, and it's not necessarily a team effort at this point right now. Right? Like, I don't think City Council really feels included as it relates to the brainstorming process to figure out what's the best way to go about this. And I'll give you my example, and then I'll close out, Madam Leader. I spent a lot of time in Kensington. I was in Kensington Sunday, right? I'm not doing City Council business. I'm just down there doing my thing because that's where my professional experiences has taken me. People know you guys are coming. And so because they know you're coming, what they're doing is they're beginning to migrate off of Kensington Avenue up into the railroad tracks and below 95. And the reason that I'm asking specifically about people who migrate away from residential and business spaces is because I'm concerned with what communication looks like to people who've decided to encamp in a space that's not residential, as well as not near a business corridor. How do we now tell this person who might not even be doing drugs? If I'm not doing drugs, I'm not participating in illegal activity, I'm not near a business corridor, and I'm not near a residential space, how can we then tell that person they can't be there? What difference is the person who decides to park a tent underneath the railroad tracks where there's nobody around them compared to the person who decides to set up a tent in Fairmount Park and essentially have, a date? I don't know the difference, but from our end, I'm not clear on what the plan is to be able to communicate what the difference is so we can understand how we use that care that Councilmember O'Rourke talked about when we are implementing a strategy to try to support Philadelphians. So I don't know if you have a response to that, but based on what I'm hearing, I think that that's a big hole that needs to be filled because, again, they know you're coming. They're 100% sure. We're 100% sure. You said it was a public knowledge. And so if folks know that this is happening, I don't think a lot of them are just going to stay on Kensington Avenue to be a part of this experiment, to be a part of this pilot. I think most of them are going to migrate to an area where they know that it would be very difficult to say you can't be here.
Councilmember, I think the good news is we have 24 folks since the date of that initial posting for an encampment resolution who've come in and are currently being sheltered and taken care of in our system as it exists today. So how did they get the word? They got the word from our incredibly dedicated outreach teams from almost every agency in city government and also from our great partners and providers. So some folks are getting the word. Certainly I have been extremely fortunate in many ways over the course of my life, and one of those ways is I've never been unhoused. I've never had that experience. So recognizing that, and with our team recognizing that, another thing we are doing, as you heard our Deputy Managing Director say, we held a charrette the other day, a design charrette with folks who have that lived experience to help understand their journeys and how, as we are building this system, we can make sure that we are providing the access that they need, the supports they need. That's not a one and done. We have 2 more of those charrettes planned so we can actually ensure that the system we are building has our communities at its center as well as the folks that we're taking care of. So we do want to understand how best to communicate to those folks, and so far, at least 24 times in the past month, it's worked.
So thank you for that information, and I think I speak for a number of council members that we appreciate the dedication to trying to address this issue. I think that what we're really just asking for is an opportunity to be a part of the brainstorming process so we can make sure that it's done in a way that we're all comfortable voting for what you're asking us for from the fiscal side to be able to fund this. And I think if we can see some of our colleagues, it doesn't have to necessarily be me, but if some of our colleagues were able to be a part of the brainstorming and the intricate dialogue as it relates to what the plan is, I think it'll put us in a position where it'll make people a lot more comfortable to be able to vote for and allocate the dollars that you're asking for to be able to rectify what we all know needs to be fixed. Thank you, Madam Leader. I appreciate it. And thank you to my colleagues for your questions, because the reality is, colleagues, I didn't have any questions when I woke up this morning, but your questions made me inquire as it relates to this issue and the direction that we're going in. So I appreciate the council members who've been really focused and diligent as it relates to the overdose crisis that we're dealing with and trying to find the best way to rectify this ill. Thank you, Madam Leader.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Thomas. The chair now recognizes myself as I'm next in the queue. I wanted to go back to very briefly just state that and clarify that the dollars we were talking about before that you mentioned were continuum of care. They were emergency services grants. We looked up the information, is in section 47 of the operating budget. It matches the amount, so that's emergency services grant. I just wanted to state that for the record so that we understand that from a fiscal standpoint as we are going through the budget. You talked about this doomsday budget and the need for the $16 million for FY25, and you also talked about how you all are expanding even right now, the services that are being provided at the site that we know is the Philadelphia Nursing Home from 48 beds to 90 beds. And when we were previously here on April 15th, Mr. Holloman, you stated that the department pays between $68 and $73 per emergency shelter bed per day. This means we are paying anywhere between $24,820 and $26,645 per shelter bed per year. And so last year in the documentation that your office and your department provided to City Council during the budget process, and for the record, that was prior to your service with OHS Managing Director Teal and Deputy Managing Director Yates, you stated that the average cost per shelter bed was $17,000. And so now we're saying the average cost is $25,732. And so as you all are talking about this expansion, particularly at the nursing home and just the need in general, could you just explain the nearly $7,000 on average increase in a shelter bed from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24?
Inflation has a lot to do with those costs. When we look at fringe benefits, keeping staff, those are all costs that are contributing to that, as we're seeing food costs go up too, but inflation is a big driver of that.
And I figured that you would say that. So my question then is, are folks working in the shelters getting paid more?
Thanks to City Council advocacy, we were able to make sure that everybody, I believe it's 1571 for direct level of staff, but that also had put a crunch on the line supervisors, and so everyone is making the 1571 in shelter.
Okay, so are they being paid more than what they were being paid the last fiscal year?
Due to the cost increase for the living wage, yes.
And relative to food costs, could you just clarify how food contracts are managed, as OHS also has food vendors?
Yeah, we provide also some level of food in the shelter, but we also know that there's additional costs that are in the contract that help supports food allocation, such as snacks. Some providers, again, have line items that they go out and purchase their own food. We have food at our warehouse, but again, that is the bare minimum for some of the facilities, but food cost is definitely included in some of the contracts there.
Okay, excellent. And how does OHS evaluate the cost of shelter and ensure providers are billing OHS for actual cost? And for the record, I did review the information that you all sent at 9:21 this morning prior to the 10 a.m. hearing while I was here. And so I did see where you all are increasing the amount of shelter visits more so than you have in the past, particularly for this year since all of this has been in question. But if you could just talk about how you all are evaluating the cost of shelter and ensure providers are billing OHS for actual cost.
Absolutely, thanks for that question. So for over the last several years, many of our shelters have not really received any significant increases. Some of the costs may vary, especially with the new shelters, the small SROs that are accommodating specialized services for seniors, which may cost a little bit more. We also have seen increases in shelter budget as a result of trying to bring new providers in where the cost of, let's just say, rent for new properties or new buildings that the shelters may be going out, that's also a cost factor in why the costs fluctuate. But what we're doing is looking across our system and seeing shelter services that are equivalent to each other and seeing where there may be indifferences in what we're paying versus previous in what we're paying.
Right, and again, I only asked that because I think you all were stating originally, prior to all this new information that we have received about the Philadelphia nursing home site, that you would need $16 million to maintain service in fiscal year 25. And so I guess what you're saying is that the $100 million that you're requesting that has yet been allocated is going to be for the wellness centers and the triage centers around the city, but the $16 million will help maintain current level of service at OHS? but also you all are involved with the nursing home? I'm just trying to get clarity on that.
Yes, so the 16 million is strictly for the Office of Homeless Services budget. The 100 million that you're referencing is for the wellness triage site, which we support those operations because they're dealing with people who are unsheltered. As managing
So pardon me, I apologize for the interruption. So are you all amending existing contracts in order to meet that need?
The wellness treatment site is different from what we're doing.
Council Majority Leader, yes, we are. That is exactly what we are doing, is we are expanding existing contracts, expanding existing services to be able to meet this interim need while we develop the plan that we are going to brief council on for the $100 million initial capital investment for a larger wellness facilities, and then talk about the operating dollars to operate those facilities.
But you understand the question, right? You all are currently requesting $16 million for FY25. The $100 million is something that would have to be determined as we work through this budget process as a council and work with the administration on this request, on what we call a proposal. And so if you're amending existing contracts, my question to you is the $16 million enough to maintain the current level of service as you are amending the contracts? Because we have not approved the $100 million.
Council member, the $100 million is capital. So
Okay.
none of that is capital, and that would be, that money, when council approves, will not be available until after July 1st in FY25. So
I understand that.
The dollars now, the $16 million in OHS's budget is, and I think this is the crux of your question, is strictly for OHS to maintain current services. We are using multiple other agencies and contracts and dollars that are available for this type of services to expand the capacity and the number of beds that we have today, even as we plan strategically for the longer term implementation.
And that is my question. If you are amending existing contracts that we currently have for this current fiscal year as this work is happening during fiscal year 24, where is that money coming from? I asked that question, I think it's a very valid question, based on where we were previously. And again, this was not during your time as the managing director. This was under the previous administration, to be very clear. But council was asked in our last mid-year transfer in the fall of 2023 via the Appropriations Committee for an additional almost $16 million. And we did grant the dollars, the $1.4 million for the nursing home and the other $9.6 million, and we held back the other $5.1 million. I think it was $5,092,634. We held that amount back because you all at that time could not provide the invoices to help us understand why you needed those dollars. And so I asked the question because the whole crust of why we are, based on the OIG's uncompleted report that was released a week after the last hearing on April 15th, I asked that question because I don't want us to be in the same space that we're spending dollars that were not originally allocated for. So the question is, if the money is not coming from OHS, where is the money coming from for the work you all are currently doing for fiscal year 24, and how much? Because the 16 million is just for the maintaining levels of service that we all know, again, are in question based on the quality. But that's a different conversation right now, okay? Where is this money coming from? What contracts are you amending, and how much?
Madam, thank you for the question. I think I can help with that. One of the things that we have done, I'm a resident of the city and care about Philadelphia, and one of the complaints that I've had as a resident is that we work in silos. For this particular thing, what we're doing differently is we're not working in silos. So it's not only OHS's budget, it's DBH's budget, it's MDO's budget, and we're all pulling together as a team to provide these services for fiscal 24 because we know that they're desperately needed.
How much? And which contracts are being amended?
I will get that for you, ma'am, and we may have to respond in writing because I don't want to misspeak, but we are looking at every opportunity to provide these services. Another thing that we have yet to talk about is we're also meeting with payers because they play a role in this too. Some of these services we want to be able to bill, and part of that is having conversations with payers so that the city is not supporting this system long-term, so that insurance payers, CBH, IBX, and others are then taking on the payment. So we can respond in how much, and we can respond which contracts, but I can't respond to that here without seeing everything in front of me in writing.
I understand, and I appreciate that. And I just asked that question for clarity based on where we are, okay? And I think it's a valid question as we are undertaking this budget process, that we have that information. And, you know, with all due respect, please don't send that information the morning of the hearing. That doesn't give us adequate time to fully review the information. When you all send me information, I have to go through all, my team and I, and I'm not gonna say I, there's no I in team, but my team and I have to go through all of these documents that you all have given us over the last year. Again, not under your tenure, under the previous administration, before you were in these positions. We have to go through these documents to match up and make sure the contracts amounts matches up and make sure all the information is aligning based on the budget details that you all have presented in previous fiscal years and the responses that you all have given us. And I'm not going to say you all, but working under the previous administration from the year before. And so if this is something that you all want us to fully understand as we are undertaking this budget process, I respectfully request that we receive this information in more advanced time so that we could adequately review it. My next question is when SEPTA was here for their budget briefing, they stated that in November 2022, they paid $25,000 to purchase 500 emergency shelter beds. They stated that they've only used 130 of the 500 beds that they purchased. Can you please detail what you all did with the payment? Did you add any additional beds with these funds? And I'm going to ask Mr. Holloman to answer this question because you weren't there. If so, how many? Or did you just take a certain number of beds offline and reserve them in case SEPTA outreach teams needed to place someone?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I don't have that details with me today, but if I can provide in writing once I consult with SEPTA how many beds were fully utilized during that time, but I don't have that detail with me today.
I understand. To your point, though, when I did ask SEPTA this at their briefing, they stated they were unable to answer the question and that we would have to follow up with OHS. And so I want to state that for the record. SEPTA also stated that they've only paid the city one time in November of 2022, again, under the previous administration. But they said they still have access to those reserved beds. So could you all just explain for us, for the record, if it was a payment in 2022 and it's now May of 2024, how does that work? Like, how does that process work as far as like an organization or quasi-government agency reserving beds at a shelter that may or may not go used?
Yeah, to be completely honest with you, I'm not familiar with that arrangement that took place at that time, even though I was in a leadership role. I wasn't part of that negotiation strategy with SEPTA, so I'm not able to provide you the details of how that came about. What I can say is that we work with many agencies that provide outreach services, and that at times we do set aside beds for some of the most difficult situations around, but I don't have background knowledge on how that came about at this time.
Okay, and so relative to not being able to respond to how that process came online, could you speak to how it works as far as when someone reserves beds, how does that work? And then if the beds go on unused, then what happens?
Yeah, as again, in the cases where we work with many of the outreach teams like Center City District, SEPTA, Outreach, there may be opportunities where we may set aside 5 beds for the outreach teams. And that's only because if they're dealing with someone who they have relationships with, it is much easier for that outreach team to have a warm handoff that's coming to our facility. Now, if those beds aren't used by a certain time, we fully utilize those beds throughout our entire system for someone else to be utilized. But we try to, especially during winter season, we know that there are difficult clients based on behavioral health challenges that they will only come in by direct handoff by outreach. And so there may be times where we set aside a bed and those things, but it's not, to my understanding, a large proportion of that.
Sure. Well, for the DBH teams, do they have the same direct access to beds, or do they have to go through intake?
Yeah, at times we, prior we had some set-asides, but now we try to have everything go through intake. One of the reasons why we want to do that is that we want to have a better system where we're doing better assessments of individuals who are coming in. And so we encourage everyone to go through centralized intake so that we can have that data into our system.
Okay, and I'll circle back to that. I just wanted to get a few more things on the record, and then I will proceed. Could you please provide the census count of the beds that are available today?
I would have to get that number for you. I don't have that off the top of my head right now.
Okay, would you all be able to provide that number today?
Yes, we
Later
can.
today via Council President for dissemination to the rest of the committee?
We can get that in writing to you today, yes.
Okay, that'll be great. Is this number based on OHS records of where folks are placed?
Absolutely. Today is Monday, so we know that we don't know what to expect coming in on a Monday morning. And so
Right.
that's based on availability of what we have in the system and how many people are coming in seeking shelters.
Okay, and do providers ever take beds offline?
Yes, in the case of if there's something that may have happened to the room or something of nature, but yeah, bed bugs or any type of situation, maybe a water pipe bust or anything of that nature, yes, they're forced to be taken offline.
Okay, I'll submit the additional questions under that line for your written response. Do providers have the ability to reject clients based on ability, identity, immigration status, justice system involvement, or mental or behavioral health history?
No, ma'am, we do not support any form of discrimination.
Okay, so OHS has never communicated to its employees to divert clients from certain placements based on ability, identity, immigration status, justice involvement, or mental or behavioral health history?
Not to my knowledge, no, we don't discriminate against anyone.
Okay. I am going to submit emails for the record from your department that have been redacted for your review that states that your department has communicated to divert folks from certain placements based on their ability, identity, immigration status, justice involvement, or mental or behavioral health history for your review. Okay? I say that because my office has received multiple calls and reports from clients who state they have been kicked out of their placement and banned from shelters. These folks have reported that they have been banned for many reasons, but as an example, I've received information that someone was banned for reporting drug sales and for requesting a new placement due to conditions at their current location, especially as it relates to, as you stated, bed bugs, roaches, and rodents. And so when OHS bans a client, they are often told they cannot return for 30 days. What happens next?
Yeah, I would like to look at those cases. I think there's more to details of when we get to look at those cases. Only time that I know that someone may not be allowed back in the facility is due to violence. And even in those cases, we try to do an appropriate discharge to another facility because we don't want anyone to go back to the street. But I think on those cases, I would love to know, first and foremost, what are those reasons? Who's that person? What type of follow-up that we did so that I can get you that information and welcome any investigation. If anyone is reporting any type of mishap, please, I'll be the first. Call me or come see me. But also report it to any appropriate level of response that's needed.
Right, agreed. And so how many clients are currently banned from receiving city services via OHS?
I would have to get that to you in writing, and again, if you're talking about on a daily basis or 30 days or however, I would need to know, I guess, based from your writing, what type of content we're looking at here.
Surely. And I'll submit the balance of those questions again for your review. How many reports came into your tip line within the last year? How many reports came into your tip line within the past year?
Same thing, I would need to get back to you in writing regarding that.
Okay, and I will hold the balance of the questions that I have, but one last one that I do want to get on the record. This will be for Managing Director's Office and OHS regarding Women Against Abuse. If you all could give us an update regarding Women Against Abuse and the funding for their 24-hour domestic violence hotline. I think that funding has been cut. According to the detail, the estimated obligation for the program is over $800,000, but the FY25 allocation is only $200,000. If you all could just explain that. Pardon me?
Councilmember, we're going to have to get back to you on that.
Okay, and so we'll circle back again under the Managing Director's Office testimony, but I will say this, and I won't add much. I do have concern relative to providers and organizations that do try to reach out for additional assistance. If they reach out to City Council, that they may be being penalized because they've reached out to us. And so I do have concern about that, and I want to put that on the record so that you all hear that directly from me to you, that there is concern that people are being punished simply for speaking up and or speaking out, all within, government. And I think it's disheartening, particularly because folks are providing a service to the city and they are just seeking to get paid. Okay, and it should be no point where we have to step in to help folks get paid. I mean, we've, allocated the dollars in OHS's particular situation to ensure they were able to meet the obligations that we received. I want to say for the record that at no time do I think we should underfund the Office of Homeless Services. But what I do believe is that we don't know what it takes to actually fully fund a fully functioning Office of Homeless Services that is providing quality service to people all across the city of Philadelphia because of all of the policy and systematic issues that have come to light over the last, I'll say, almost 2 years at this point. And so I want to be very clear that I've, never stated that we should, not fund the department. We should fund for the invoices that we are able to see that make sense. Yes, and that's what we did last year. But I do think that we need to fully understand what a fully functioning OHS department would look like as far as quality service to people. And that's what we are seeking, to provide quality service to those who are experiencing homelessness and who are unhoused in the city. And my last two things. One, David Holloman, I do want to thank you for your work and for your service. We did work together on a number of cases. That did, I did not forget about that, and I do want to say thank you for the work that you did and how you did step up in a time of transition that was very difficult, right? To no fault of your own, I believe. Sometimes we can't control what's happening around us. And then finally, I would ask that before you all leave from the Office of Homeless Services, there are individuals who are here in this hearing today who are experiencing homelessness and who are unhoused. I would like to ask that your staff speak with them directly and see what services they need so that they can receive the help necessary to move forward in our city. Thank you very, very much.
Absolutely, and thank you.
Madam, thank you. We agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Okay, Councilmember Brooks was next in the queue, and so I'll ask that she submit her questions for the record. We will be taking a recess. Managing Director's Office and the Philadelphia Police Department, we thank you for your patience. We thank you for being here, but we will take a recess at 1 o'clock, and we will return at 2 p.m. Thank you very, very much.